Operations and Safety Committee meeting for Monday, January 27th, 2020. It would all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ms. Williams is delayed in traffic, so I'm going to chair the meeting until she arrives, which is hopefully very shortly. First order of business, approval of minutes.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Any changes? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay. Public comment, 3 minutes. Is there any public comment for today? No? Okay, appearing to be none. We'll move forward with the presentations.
If I might, just so we have it on the record, during the calling of the meeting to order, we should reflect that Director Overman is attending telephonically. She's on the phone.
So noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, public presentations. We have the first one, 2019 accident analysis from Mr. Malloy. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Colin Malloy. I am the Director of Safety and Security for the Hillsborough Area Regional Transit Authority. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in front of the committee. Today I will be presenting on both the 2019 accident analysis as well as other events. And then later there's actually a presentation that talks about the last quarter, give a breakdown of the type of events that we've received and seen within our organization. So in setting up this presentation, I'm first going to reference the 2019 success plan, then how that relates to the National Transit Database and HART safety events. After that, kind of giving a more in-depth breakdown of our accidents in totality, as well as sharing with the board the physical and verbal altercations that we've seen and the mitigation factors that we put in. And then any questions that you may have, I'll be happy to address. So the 2019 success plan was really the guiding document that our agency used in terms of strategically how we viewed success. There was a number of key outcomes that were developed within that plan, such as service productivity, our fund balance, the customer service experience, as well as safety. And we knew going into 2019 that safety was a core element, and we really solidified that by making it one of the critical items. As not only did we want to increase safety, we also wanted to see a reduction in the number of safety events that we see in our organization. Now, in previous committee presentations, I've talked about SMS and PTASP, and one of the things that pops up is how do you define a safety event? And that's what I wanted to in the next slide is briefly talk about how we define a safety event. So in establishing this metric, we've used the National Transit Database, or NTD. NTD really is the gold standard that the FTA looks at in terms of reporting information that transit agencies are required to provide. It looks at things such as your passenger trips, your revenue miles, your asset management, as well as safety and security items. So each month we're reporting through NTD our safety and security events. And to give you a breakdown of what those events are, is those are really your larger and significant events. So when we have an accident that has a large amount of property damage, or if there's injury that's associated with that event, if there is a medical transport, or if a bus should be evacuated for those reasons, those are those large significant items that NTD that we're reporting up on. So with that in mind, it's also the industry's baseline, and it's the metric that can be viewed across agencies in terms of their specific definitions. So what has HART done in terms of safety events? So we look at that NTD reportable, and then we cross-reference it by the number of passenger revenue miles. So last year, in terms of the NTD reportables, we actually saw a 20% decrease. And later in the presentation, I share with you some of the mitigation factors that we put in through the 2019 success plan that helped drive us to show this reduction in the large, significant type of events when it comes in relationship to accidents. But I also want to share with you the type of accidents that we see based on our NTD is that our primary types are public or privately owned vehicles colliding with our buses. Those could be side impacts, they could be rear-end collisions, as well as the most significant type of injury that we find within our agency is going to be slip, trips, and falls. So as someone is boarding the bus, they slip and ask for medical treatment at that point. And when we provide a medical transport, that becomes a reportable. When they're exiting the bus. Also, when the bus is in motion, people moving between seats. Those are really some of the largest type of, in terms of the total number of injuries that we see. And the factors that cause those are hard braking events in Tampa traffic. So there's hard braking events that can lead to some of these injuries. Again, our buses being rear-ended. And I talk about that in the next slide as well to give you a little bit breakdown as a percentage of our total accidents. And again, while the bus is in motion, people falling as they're either standing on the bus or moving between seats. So NTD talks about the large significant events, but we also wanted to share with this committee a percentage of our total accidents that we see within our system. So when you look at the total accidents, not just the large significant events that we have, this is what this pie chart represents. So the vast majority of accidents that we see within our system are fixed object collisions or mere contacts. They represent close to 40% of the type of events that we saw in 2019. A lot of these are low property damage. There's low injury on those, but they do represent an indirect cost to this agency. So if we need to pull that bus out of service for a fixed object collision, we may not have a large property bill, but we're pulling that bus out of service, and in the case of CNG, we have to do a full inspection to make sure that those tanks haven't received any type of significant damage. So although they are low dollar value, they do represent a large indirect cost. So if you were to ask what is the most significant type of event in terms of accidents at HART sees, fixed object and mere contacts would be that event. That is followed by third-party vehicles hitting our bus. So roughly 28% of all our accidents within the HART system are third-party vehicles attempting to either get around our bus, running through stop signs, through traffic signals at intersections, but causing a side impact or a side swipe represent, roughly 28%. Rear-end collisions represent 10% of our total accidents in 2019. Florida actually is unfortunately one of the highest states when it comes to buses being rear-ended, and that represents a significant amount of the accidents that we see. So if you were to take just the third-party vehicles that are side swiping or causing side impacts, as well as in rear-ending our buses, that represents close to 38% of all of our total accidents. And in many cases, those are what we call non-preventable, in which the bus operator did everything in their power to not have that event occur. We do have some incidents where our bus operator did not maybe do everything within their power to stop that. Roughly 10% of our accidents, or what we call either preventable, an operator may have hit another vehicle. A lot of times that's from distraction. They may not have positioned the bus in the best light, and all of those operators in terms of those go through kind of retraining with both our operations and safety department. We also have there are situations where the bus operator has also rear-ended vehicles as well, and they go through retraining when those events take place. So I wanted to just put this pie graph because the NTD are the large, significant ones, but we also, in totality, the type of accidents that we have is really the fixed object, mere contact collisions, third-party vehicles side-swiping our buses, being rear-ended, and then the ones that HART has maybe initiated that our operators then go through retraining. So those are the accidents, but we wanted to also share with the board a breakdown of the physical and verbal altercations that we've received. So I want to, one of the things that, we roughly travel we provide 13 million trips every year. So of those 13 million trips, we experienced approximately 16 kind of physical altercations last year. So again, we had 16 physical altercations, and in breaking those down, in looking at severity, we had the two kind of stabbing incidents in both May and November. Those were 2 out of 13 million trips, but the severity caused a lot of the actions that we put into place. The vast majority last year is what we call like physical contact, so that could be a patron placing their hands on one of our bus operators, someone pushing one of our bus operators. Those are what we would classify more as the physical contact. And then we see a lot of spitting. Patrons spitting are, in terms of the 16 events, individuals that spit on a bus operator or they throw a liquid on them. So I have the percentages here, but I do want to put out that of these physical altercations, that's 16 out of 13 million trips. I mean, one event is too many, and we take these very, very serious in terms of all of these activities. But we wanted to share that those are those numbers. Now, when it comes to verbal, we had over 200 what we would call verbal altercations or assaults last year. And that's one of the things we've been really concerned in. In the next presentation, I talk about the last quarter of what we experienced. And there's been some movement in the last quarter that we wanted to share with this board. But in 2019, 75% of our verbal altercations were what we call like offensive language or cursing. So an example that our operators would see is that someone comes onto our bus playing loud music. Our operator states, "Could you please turn that music off?" The response from the patron is they curse. They curse out one of our operators. We see that more frequently than we would like. And in some cases, that response is threatening language. And in the next presentation, I talk about what's occurred in the last couple months is that we're seeing an increase in this threatening behavior. And it's really concerning to our organization. And we put in steps to really mitigate this as much as we can. We're continuing to look at it. But there are members of the public that get on our bus, and they do threaten both physical harm. We've had operators that have reported that they've been threatened that someone is going to kill them, that someone is going to beat them up, that someone is going to use a knife on them. And these are the very serious things that we're looking at of how we mitigate that in a holistic approach. But again, it's a little bit over 200 events last year. That is out of 13 million. But our perspective has been, one incident is too many, and we've been really working on trying to be proactive and being a leader in this space on deliverables. And I'll talk about some of the deliverables that we've done under the leadership of Ms. Carolyn House Stewart and Mr. Lemon. So the decrease in accidents that we saw, these were some of the mitigations throughout the year that were part of our success plan, is that we instituted quarterly safety trainings. So we do look at the number of events that we have, and then we kind of correspond training to help mitigate some of that. So it could be ADA type training, it could be distraction training, it could be security-based training, but we're doing that quarterly. We also looked at how we have our Train the Trainer program. So as new bus operators came in, we really put an investment into making sure that the bus operators that are doing on-the-job training with our new employees have a level of professionalism with them so that we're putting our employees in a position to succeed once they get out into the road. We've also used safety promotion. So we've done a number of SAFE campaigns in terms of talking to the public about some of the ways to stay accident-free, as well as promoting and highlighting some of the different employees that have gone above and beyond when it comes to safety, and even had Safety Day of Actions where we had union participation, we had maintenance employees, we had bus operators, we had supervisors. So we've really tried to bring everybody together as one heart to really promote safety throughout our organization. That's what I have for 2019. I can go into the quarterly information if you like, or go, okay. So in looking at, similar to, again, just I wanted to break down kind of where we were in terms of this quarter to give you kind of breakdown of where our data is trending. Again, so I'll be talking about those safety events based on the NTD. as well as the accident analysis and the physical and verbal altercations, but then also finish by talking about the action items that we've done in this last quarter. So in terms of the larger events, as I talked about with the National Transit Database, we are currently on track to meet our 2020 success goal. The primary types are very similar to what we experienced last year, is that they are third-party vehicles. Our buses are continually to be rear-ended and sideswiped, and individuals falling in motion are kind of the largest ones. But we are currently on track through the first quarter to meet our goal, and we'll keep this board abreast of that information as it is moving forward. So in terms of our accidents, so this next slide, I talked about in 2019 our fixed object collisions and our mirror contacts. In the last couple months, we have seen an increase. And it's one of the things that we're working on our training department now, is that we're seeing an increase that these are low dollar value type of events, but we're seeing an increase in the frequency of our buses maybe hitting a sign as they're driving down 7th Avenue here, or getting in contact with those fixed objects. And what our issue is that although there may not be direct costs, anytime we pull a bus out of service to get checked because of that, that's one less bus on the road providing service to the community. So that's one of the key things that we're looking at in the next quarterly safety training. And I talk about action items that we are to, how do we mitigate those type of events. The root causes, again, are distraction amongst bus operators, not paying attention. They may not be focused completely on the road, and we think training can kind of help mitigate some of that. Roughly 25% of them was a third-party vehicle striking HART. We saw about 8% was HART striking a third-party vehicle. The rear end stayed similar to the same at 10%. So the biggest change, we would say, just from a board level that we saw, is the increase in fixed object collisions in terms of our accidents. So I wanted to highlight the, again, the physical and verbal altercations that we've had in the last couple months. We had the incident in November, but we also had some additional information that we wanted to bring to the board's attention, is that we did have an operator earlier that was hit in the head trying to break up a fight between teenage patrons. Then we also had a patron that had water thrown on her while the patron was exiting the bus. And in December, a patron that was upset because he missed his stop decided to walk to the front of the bus, attempt to throw hot chocolate at the operator. We did have a shield on, so the shield got some of that liquid, but there was some that got over the side of the shield. But in terms of the physical assaults or physical altercations or battery, those are the type that we've seen in the last couple months. Again, the verbal altercations, roughly 60% were related to offensive language and cursing at the operator. 40% have been related to either threatening to harm or kill our operator. And this is a significant thing, because what our concern has been is after the horrible event previously in the year, we did see an increase of people threatening to harm our operators. They may not have been always acting on that, but we were hearing of that they would threaten to kill, repeat what they did in May to an operator. The language that some of our patrons are showing our employees is very problematic. And in working and speaking with our union members, it's one of the reasons in the next slide I talk about the action items, but we really looked at this information, and it was one of the reasons that we really pushed for some legislative help and increasing signage on our buses, because although they're low, we have 13 million trips. We have over 200 incidents where an operator has been verbally either threatened or verbally cursed at, and that's not acceptable to us. And we're asking for some legislative help that can be part of a holistic approach to how we deter these things from occurring in the first place. So on that, I just wanted to, we have not been sitting still on this issue. Under leadership, from Carolyn House Stewart, Mr. Limmer, they have made this a priority, and we have really been working day and night to have deliverable actions to show to this board of what we've done. And I just wanted to highlight some of the things that we've been doing, is that, this last quarter we did the Ride with Respect campaign. So I talked about that harassment and the threatening language that our operators were seeing. We wanted to communicate that our employees are members of the public. They're either members of your church, they're members of the PTA, they coach your softball team, they help assist with the soccer team, they teach dance. We have such amazing employees here, and we tried to personalize that the employees in your bus operator, that they are people as well. And we enhanced our signage. So with the shields, we put on additional decals on there about what the consequences are for assault or battery on a bus operator. So we increased that signage on our entire fleet over the last quarter. We worked with the ATU, and I just want to thank the ATU and the union in terms of helping us design these shields and being partners in that process. The maintenance employees really bended over backwards to make sure that we got those shields in as quickly as possible. I just want to thank all of our staff because they really did this in record time. And if you look back in terms of coordinating on the design of the shield, getting a custom fabricated shield designed, fabricated, sent to us, installed, this last quarter the team has really worked day and night to show deliverables to this community and to our employees that we take this serious. In December, we also worked with Tampa PD on presence at targeted locations. So we identified certain areas that we wanted to make sure that we had highlighted police presence, so they were actually getting on the buses and getting off the buses. We also did a pilot in December with contracted security guards on some of the buses that we saw the highest number of incidents, whether verbal or physical. So we ran a pilot to see this is really the first time that I'm aware of in the state of Florida, transit agencies such as HART doing a pilot of having contracted security guard actually on the buses. So we're going to review that and see if it makes sense moving forward. But we're looking at additional tools of how we can help protect our patrons and our employees. The transit worker assault legislation, I think there's a presentation from our Director of Government Affairs, but we looked at these verbal altercations and these threatening assaults, and we wanted to get legislative help of how we dealt with it. We were up in Tallahassee last week speaking to legislators, talking about how do we, bring this issue to the forefront, because there's nothing more important in this organization than the safety of its employees and its passengers. And, we've took the lead in trying to move that forward of how we help have lessons learned from our agency that can be used across the state of Florida. So we've really been spearheading that, and we're going to continue to push. One of the things that we got feedback from our employees that they wanted an updated notification of, they wanted to know who was trespassed on our system. We have over 100 people that are trespassed from the HART system working with Tampa PD and Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. And our employees came to us, we'd like you guys to communicate that better. So one of the things we put together, breakdowns of who is trespassed, and got that in the bus operators lounge. So again, just examples of working with our employees. We looked at our fare collection. We revised the SOP of saying, going from, monitoring the fare and making sure that we again reiterate that HART's position is we do not want any operator to get in any type of altercation over a bus fare. So we revised that SOP. So those are the activities I just wanted to let, in the last quarter that we've been doing. We're not going to stop. We're going to continue. One of the things that we're looking at is how do we work with the mental health community in terms of whether it's Hillsborough County's Crisis Center or Grace Point, doing additional training in terms of how to interact with the mental health community. We also did the de-escalation training with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, so we are continuing to work this issue, and we will continue to do that through next year. Some of the upcoming things that we have planned is our quarterly safety trainings will be taking place in February. We will be doing additional safety blitz and awareness programs, safe driving observations by management, operator and staff coaching for when different events take place, and as I referenced, working on that mental health component. So again, we take this very serious. It's a core item for us, and I just want to, as I'm giving the presentation, just thank the maintenance department, the union, our bus operators, the safety staff, the operations staff, because on the backside, this team has been really working hard to make this issue a critical item for our agency. Any questions in that?
Mr. Mishnick, you're
Colin, thank you for that report. Couple of questions. One is, does this legislation address the verbal altercations or just the physical ones?
No, the legislation does look at verbal assaults. So when there is a verbal assault, the legislation is looking at enhancing that penalty when someone threatens to kill one of our bus operators or threatens to do harm. It would move it from a third-degree misdemeanor to, or it would move it from the highest form of misdemeanor to the lowest form of a felony.
Does that include cursing or only threats?
Really threatening. Our intent is for the threatening type of language that when you attempt to say that you're going to kill an operator, slice their throat, those are the things that we want consequences, as well as signage. One of the things the legislation does is it's not a mandatory minimum. We're not looking for anything like that. We do not want to put anybody in jail. We just want these actions to stop to our bus operators. We want to deter these things from occurring, and that's why the legislation also calls for increased signage. It calls for mandatory de-escalation training. It recommends the installation of these shields. So it really is more of a holistic approach, and we really leverage the things that we've been doing as well as FTA best practices that we feel the state of Florida should put in, and that's why we spearheaded this legislation, sir.
Okay, thank you. My other question was, I realize you're still compiling the data, but what kind of anecdotal evidence do you have regarding the security guards? I mean, have we had favorable experiences with that? And if so, could you provide examples of that?
Yeah, so we moved one of the action items, thank you for the support from this board and from our leadership, is that we moved from unarmed security guards, which was a level 1, to armed security guards at a level 5. So that means that our security guards have either military or police backgrounds, they have higher training, and anecdotally, just to let you know in terms of our conversations, is that our employees have felt more protected having that armed police officer at our transit centers. One of the things that we instituted was a armed security patrol that goes along the Metro Rapid route, or really that corridor from University Area Transit Center down Nebraska to the Marion Transit Center. Those routes, so the Route 400, the Route 1, those are the routes, and I'm just speaking on the routes that we do see the highest type of events that occur. So we looked at that information, and that's why we put the armed security patrol along those routes. It was based on the increase we saw, so that has been favorable. We also increased security at our 21st Avenue location, so our maintenance employees, we put an armed security guard in the back. That was in one of the things that our operators, or our maintenance employees especially, wanted to make sure that we had some armed presence there. What we do hear from operators, and that's why we did the pilot, is that they would like to see either police or security on the buses. So we did in December look at this pilot. We want to evaluate the results on that to find what makes the most sense. Now, we would not be able to put a security guard in every bus route in every bus. I mean, we have 133 that go out every morning. So we want to evaluate that. We have shown a pilot, but that is one of the things we're looking at now, sir, of whether there is a need and what the breakdown is of having actual guards on specific routes on buses. So that's what we're looking at now and what the operators have come back to us to look a little bit more fully on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Sisler, you are recognized.
Thank you. Good presentation, good information. Do have one question though, regarding the accident issues and so forth. Is there any kind of a committee or a group that meets to discuss these individual issues, or is this something that just management says, okay, you have to go back to retraining, we have to do this with that? Is there any input or any kind of a study done? Granted, there's the number of occurrences. How is this reviewed, and how are the final outcomes handed out?
So what we currently have in place is that we do have a series of safety committees. So we have a maintenance committee, we have a streetcar committee, and we have a bus committee that does meet. But we are looking, one of the things that, and we do share kind of safety events and accidents and things that occur at that point. But we are looking to kind of enhance that in partnership with the ATU. So one of the things, I don't want to, but in the contract negotiations, we have been working with the ATU just of how we enhance the committees. I don't want to speak too in depth on that, but we want to enhance that structure in terms of working with the ATU, and it's one of the things that we've had great partnership with them of just both sides want us to enhance and kind of put it in language of how we work together more so as a committee.
I'm good. I'm glad to hear that because they're a big stakeholder in the whole issue. Further, and then just another question regarding the safety, where we had TPD coming on board. Did we do the same thing with the sheriff's office, or was just TPD?
In this case, we used Tampa PD. We'd be open to the sheriff's office, and that's something we can do in the future. But in this case, we worked with Tampa PD in terms of having people on and off the buses.
Was that where the preponderance of the altercation issues came from? Was in city limits, or?
It was primarily that Nebraska corridor in terms of, and we actually work with Tampa PD in terms of the number of calls that they receive on certain intersections. So they have a criminal analysis division as well. So we provided our information with Tampa PD's criminal analysis, and they helped us pick some different hot spots that they were on and off the buses for a period of time.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kipp, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you for the update. It's a big, important topic. For board members that don't know, we were on the front of the Tampa Bay Times today with this specific issue. One of the things that I was called by a reporter last week was about the fact that I'd requested that we start tracking, like we do our transit numbers, just our incidents. So for the board's purpose, and so that we're just aware of what's going on. And I know that was never done. It was never provided for us. I wasn't appointed to this committee, so I wasn't particularly riding herd on that, but I'm wondering about what is the quarterly reports now that you're speaking of here, is that, are you going to be providing those to the board on a regular basis now?
Yes, ma'am, and we had scheduled this presentation even prior to the Tampa Bay article, so we wanted to make sure that, these are new processes we're putting in place, but we had the quarterly information, but this is going to be what we do moving on, is communicating with this board quarterly basis, doing a better job of providing that information and giving you a fuller picture of what's occurring. So we have been working on it, prior to the New Year's, getting this information together for you, and again, we'll be providing these up on a quarterly basis and any additional frequency that the board would like, but we definitely want to make sure we're providing the information to you moving forward.
And I was very concerned when I was alerted to, again by the reporter, about the basis. While our reporting seemed to be somewhat better than they were doing at PSTA, the fact that we still do our entire reporting on paper rather than digitally in any way that we can access was very concerning to me, I'm just quoting what I said in the paper, at least we could scan it in. And so I'm concerned about that tracking system.
So the tracking system within safety, we use an Excel document that is paper-driven, but I can tell you our risk department, though, all the incident reports, they do scan into a PDF, and our risk department does keep those. That information is scanned. The tracking, we're moving forward to looking at software solutions so that we could have a more detailed kind of breakdown and moving away from that paper system. So that is where we'll be moving forward, and we'll be reporting to the board on that. So in terms of the tracking, it is paper-driven, but I also want to let you know that the risk department does scan all documents. They electronically keep them, so whether it's a HIPAA item or workers' comp, all those items are scanned digitally. But we do have for the safety, a lot of the safety accidents are paper items that are tracked with an Excel document.
And one of the particular incidents that I think about is the driver who came to us and spoke to us, a woman that a few years ago had been punched while she was driving or operating as a driver. And then she had made a lot of complaints about the lack of, it sounded like, although I didn't know about the processes, the lack of kind of support by the agency, by HART, for her complaints as it was prosecuted. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to that a little, in terms of what we're doing now, or follow-up, or I'm just trying to understand.
Yes, ma'am. So we provide a lot of different avenues. I'm not, I need more information on that specific case, but I can tell you what we do provide is, so again, all our buses have panic buttons installed on them. We put in the security awareness monitors. They're in real-time communication with our control center, so whenever there is an issue, they are able to be immediately in contact with them. And we have supervisors that are able to respond, and our protocol is if an operator has any issue, we're immediately notifying TPD or Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. The supervisors do follow-ups. We offer EAP-type programs, so if an operator goes through a type of traumatic event, our Human Resources Department does a great job of, we have an EAP program. We brought EAP in for the entire agency, both on some of these significant events that occurred recently. So we do have that EAP program.
What is EAP?
Oh, I'm sorry, Employee Assistance Program. So if there's counseling or any other type of items that, we put in there. So we do have these processes in place. We do take them serious. Our Human Resources Department is a great team that, if the operator chooses to do employee assistance programs, we give them all the resources that we can.
And in terms of the trespassing, as you said, there are like 100, so I had heard from drivers very recently, and I guess you're going to deal with that, but that they used to do postings in the lounge. They used to have posted the trespassing, those that were banned or trespassed and couldn't get on buses. And then at some point, more recently, I guess, that was removed and hadn't been put up, but now they're going to be posted in the employees' lounge again?
Yeah, so what I can tell you is we heard that concern and we acted immediately on that. So we have put together a trespass log and booklet, so all of our operators have access to this binder that has every single person that is currently trespassed on our system and is placed directly in the bus operator's lounge. We have specific staff that is now updating to make sure that it is up to date each and every single day. And we email that information up to our supervisors. So that was one of the items we got operators' input, and we really worked aggressively of updating that notification and making sure that we provide those pictures in a binder to all of our operators.
Great. And the other that I'd just like to not specifically know more, but maybe hear more in the future, because you said right now it's a pilot program. I don't know what kind of best practices is on other places, but obviously some kind of police, sheriff's, support, even if a random boardings or whatever it is something that I think we need to look at as an ongoing program. I guess you're doing that, but I just think it's important that the board is updated as to, what happens with this and how we move forward on doing that.
Yes, ma'am. We've been in contact with law enforcement of working of what resources we can coordinate with them on, and we'll keep this board updated on the progress of those topics. Yes, ma'am.
And we are in communication and have been with TPD. Part of the issue is if you have officers who are on active patrol and they get a call, they're gone. And we've been trying to work on a program where they will use the extra board, as they call it, and it has to be an interest in the extra board officers who've worked 8 to 10 hours a day to come and do this. But Colin and I personally have been working on that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smith?
Thank you. Thank you for these reports, and I just have a few questions. But first, I want to highlight that I think this organization has really responded well in several ways to the need to increase our safety. The SHIELD implementation was very fast and very well done, and worked with the drivers and the unions and the manufacturers to get that accomplished. The de-escalation training was also something called for by the union. I didn't see that specifically in here. I guess that's incorporated in the quarterly.
So we did a specific, it's more of semantics, so the training actually occurred like in August, so that wasn't necessarily recorded, but we really did a custom program, so we got with Sheriff Conister and Hillsborough County Sheriff's actually developed a customized curriculum for us on de-escalation and situational awareness. I'm very proud of the partnership we had with them because not only was that training developed by the Sheriff's Office, they actually conducted it. The sheriff came in for our very first training and did the training. So deputies continued. I think we did close to 35 to 40 those trainings throughout this period on de-escalation. And we brought back one of the items is to, this committee talked about making sure maintenance employees got that training. So we did then follow up to make sure maintenance employees also received that training as well. So I highlight that just because our team worked really hard on it. One of the things, though, because we're not letting this issue drop, is that we really want to look at the mental health side of this now. So that's one of the things that we've been looking at, is that we have the de-escalation, the situational awareness, but how do we handle some of these mental health as we provide a social service and transportation? Our employees are really at the forefront. How do we help give them the tools and help support them in some of those unique circumstances? And that's what we're looking at now, and one of the things we'll be reporting back to this committee and to the board is where we are in that process.
Thank you. And the trespassing steps you described to help the drivers address that is, just another very, very good step in the right direction. I think one of the most, well, if not, I think the most concerning thing about the article in the newspaper today was really the way the information is collected and presented to board members, to this committee, to the public and the press. And so just a couple of more questions about that. This quarterly safety data that you're presenting to us, it says Q1 for 2020, but it's kind of early for that, really. Does that mean that's the past quarter, or?
So that information is really from October through December, ma'am. So we'll be perpetually updating. I mean, you'll be seeing a lot more repetition type of data, but this information I'm showing is roughly from October 1st through December 31st.
Okay, so in my mind, that's like Q4 of 2019, but thank you.
I can straighten that up in future presentations. I apologize.
And so, talking about how the data is logged, and the newspaper, reported some staff explanations that you're moving to more of a data-driven system where it'd be easier to share. It seems like an Excel document is digital, that, you're talking about that being paper, but it's really a digital format that could be easily shared.
Yes, and we want to have a more robust system that's looking at, the time of day events take place, the years of service our operators have, is doing that deeper dive, that a software that can more readily kind of get that information, of moving beyond an Excel document to something more robust that we could provide. So that's an improvement. It's one of our action items that we're going to report on. I guess our strategy is we knew that there was deliverables that we had to do for our employees. So that was really our first priority, was doing these deliverables and showing movement. And there is work we need to do on that. And Ms. Carolyn House-Stewart has been a great supporter of that, and we're going to continue to improve kind of how we track that and come back.
So sorry.
No, we authorize additional staff for safety, some temporary, to go through those boxes where things were stored in response to what the reporter asked, because we did not have a system that could go back 2 or 3 years and pull the specific data that was requested. And so we are doing that now, and I know that we looked at 2 electronic systems. One system did not work with the system. We spent about 2 months looking at a system that we could use for both risk and safety to save cost, but that system was incompatible with what we already had in our IT system, so we had to go back to start from square one with that. It required us taking new equipment, putting out in the field for our supervisors when they went to the scene with their tablets. They now type in some things, and part of the report, that would have required us to take that whole system out. So we're looking at a new system that will give us real-time reporting that will go to both risk and safety.
And because, Commissioner Kemp is quite correct, this is exactly how I remember our, when we were setting up this committee, is that we requested monthly reports on safety. So is that going to be able to be accomplished just like, I think, by email to the board?
Yes, we will. No, we will make sure that that happens. As you know, the Prophet incident happened in November, and we gave the report. We gave you certain updated emails on that incident, and then we gave the report in December. And so we find ourselves now here in January, and we're giving that report, and we will continue to do these reports.
Quarterly or?
Well, we'll do both. If the committee wants a monthly report, we will deliver a monthly report. But we certainly figure that if you give your quarterly report, then you will have a more big picture item rather than in the month of January, someone threw Starbucks coffee on an operator, rather than having in the last 3 months we had on and on and on. I just use that as an example, not that happened.
Right.
So we will give you the monthly reports to this committee, and if you agree, we can give monthly to the board or quarterly to the board.
Yeah, and if I could, just one more. I think another thing that jumped out at me in terms of the information is the way the public information requests were handled, that apparently they were told there was a $700 and something charge to handle that, and we're told a spreadsheet didn't exist, but then it turned out that spreadsheet did exist. So I think I'd like to know more about how our public information requests are responded to.
Well, as you know, the Florida law says that we can charge for production of some public records request. A request of that magnitude requires additional staff time, and we have our public records request department. They respond to the public records request, and so that requires the public records department to have input from different departments within the agency, and that takes resources being pulled away from what these people normally do to go back and pull it. So under the public records request, it's my understanding that some media requests in the past, we did not charge for that. And so now, depending on the magnitude of the request, the number of documents, and someone from the department may be here, Jason is here, and also Sylvia from legal. And so a decision was made that sometimes these requests, we've had a lot of requests, a lot of time, and so it's not unusual for some agency to charge for some public request because of the time and resources needed to respond to that request.
I understand. I think $759 was an awful lot to charge.
I cannot tell you if that is a correct number or not. I cannot tell you if that's the correct number or not.
So I'll possibly talk with you and staff offline maybe about what exactly the responses have been and what they might be moving forward.
Okay, well, the responses, I can tell you the responses is that we responded, and we went through several boxes of data, and we had 3 people in a room for about 2 days going through them, and one person was hired as a temporary person to come in and help give this information. And so these are costs that, going forward, we have to make a determination internally, what can we afford to do free to the public, and what can we just give to the public without a cost. And Mr. Smith can certainly talk about the cost of producing public records requests.
Well, you're absolutely correct with your statement of the law. I think that's a policy the entire board might want to look at. You also have to bear in mind some requests are not as benign as a request from a newspaper. Sometimes we have our adversaries that inundate us with public records requests, partly to serve their own purposes. But be that as it may, I'm not suggesting any particular policy, but I think it's something you ought to look at.
And also, some requests are excluded under the public records request because they're in litigation or they're an active workers' comp claim, and someone has to make that determination of what we can produce. So it's not just a matter of pushing a button and sending all emails or sending everything in the safety data, because there may be a corresponding document in the risk department or the workers' comp department that is excluded.
So I would just, possibly the way forward is for me to follow up with the staff in a briefing on how that works and how it might work a little smoother moving forward.
Sure. Thank you.
Good morning, this is Commissioner Overman. I have a question, please.
You're recognized.
Thank you. I appreciate the amount of work that's gotten ready for this particular issue as it's come up. I too received a couple of phone calls from the press asking questions regarding our safety procedures and where we were. My biggest concern is that we seem to have good data on how our equipment is cared for, i.e. our buses. But I think it's just as important to have the priority as our most valuable resource are our drivers. As this legislation moves forward, it's going to be even more critical that we have the appropriate data and evidence of an assault or the report that has occurred, because the consequences are going to be much greater. There will be either a public defender or an attorney on the other side of the arrest. And so it's going to be much more important that this data be not only readily available, but also consistent so that our drivers are protected and the organization as well. Question I have is, previously we had a contractor, if I'm not mistaken, that had camera systems on the buses, and I think that either no longer exists or has changed. Can someone update me on that? Because I think having video of an incident is going to be valuable in not only the documentation and how to best address the occurrence, but will be necessary in the event that an arrest is made, or given the current legislation, should it pass, that the charges be more onerous than they have been in the past.
Yes.
Can someone help me with that one?
Yes, I'd be happy to, ma'am. You're absolutely correct. When we started this year, we had a end-of-life camera system that really was past its useful life. It only had a certain number of cameras, did not have audio. This organization put through a procurement to enhance the surveillance system on our buses. We doubled the amount of cameras on our buses. We also included audio. We moved to having HD camera quality on those surveillance systems, as well as including the security awareness monitors. So we roughly went from having 4 or 5 cameras on our buses and paratransit fleet to having close to 11 on our fixed route fleet. So we did make that movement in terms of updating our security surveillance system in both the number of cameras, the quality of the cameras, and additional security enhancements such as a security awareness monitor. We're evaluating that system right now. We may be moving in a different direction with that camera system, but our agency completely shares the board members' concern that we want to make sure that we have top-of-the-line security surveillance system on our buses, and we've really been moving forward to make sure that happens with our procurement process.
But
I thank you for that.
buses on the
That's
cameras.
very helpful.
there are cameras on the buses and audio on the buses now.
I think I recommend.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Commissioner Overman. I think I recommend maybe the understanding of what is available and how often it's provided or in what circumstances. The other call out, Mr. Malloy, I thank you so much for your overview. This is a great overview. And if someone asks me what keeps me up at night, it's the safety of our employees. And so this is very key and instrumental for us to have. A couple of things I want to ask, and if you can't answer it now, you want to take it back, that's okay as well. You noted that on the bus, if they were standing, do we ask them to remain seated when the bus is in motion?
Yes, in most cases, we the bus will normally wait and we'll ask someone to seat, but, we're not able to force someone to sit down. They are able to stand during our buses, so it is one of the things that we ask our operators to keep the bus remain stationary until someone sits down and move the bus. But there are situations where someone is getting up. To give you an example, is you're approaching a stop. So as someone is approaching their stop, they might not remain seated the entire time. So they see their stops coming, they get up, and as they're moving forward, they may lose their balance and fall. We have those type of events that occur.
Okay, so there's nothing recorded that you push a button or either a statement on the bus that says, please remain seated until we come to a full stop?
I will double check the signage on that, ma'am.
Okay.
I'll get back to you in terms of the exact signage on that language.
Thank you. And 38% for fixed objects, mirror damage. You talked about retraining. Do we remove them from a vehicle if we continue to have incidences like that?
Yeah, so it's laid out specifically in the contract, so we do a number of things of, it's kind of a tiered process, so depending on the nature of the event, they'll go through retraining. They may be given a written warning if it's found to be at fault, or preventable, excuse me. Then there's a progression based on the number they have in a certain period of time. So normally there's a sit-down discussion where they're counseled. The training department will do refresher training with them. They're coached, and if they meet a certain number within a year, their employment is terminated. But we try to really train our operators and invest in them so that we can correct the behavior that's causing the issue as opposed to getting rid of someone.
Okay, and is there role play in that training?
Yeah, a lot of it is situated. So we use the cameras a lot of times. So we have this camera system on there. So one of our safety specialists, for example, like Robert Dorsey, will sit down with a bus operator. They'll actually show the incident that takes place, and say, hey, maybe you could have positioned the bus this way, or, maybe at this one moment you were distracted you were talking to a passenger or something like that. So we go through in a kind of a coaching and counseling session of, these are steps that we would recommend that you do moving forward so this incident doesn't take place in the future.
That's good, thank you very much. And last but not least, and I think it's heard from others, the results. I see that we have the pie charts, we have what percentage of the time it happens. It shows a 20% in decrease from 2018 to 2019.
Yes.
I'm just curious at the targets, if you could include the targets on the document.
Okay.
So, because from my understanding, you get a target this year, let's say 5%. Next year, you get a 4% target. And if you're at 4%, the following year, you get a 4.5% target. So I just like to understand the trends and how we hold ourselves accountable to safety and as well as recognizing that there are things that we can do for preventable ones. And then those from a customer perspective, do they understand the consequences if they violate agreement on the bus? Is it posted, or is it, I would say, voice message?
Yes, ma'am. So one of the things we did put in an audible announcement in terms of like our fares. We've also, I talked about the action items we did in the last couple months was increasing the signage on the consequences for some of their actions. So there's actually when we installed the shields, there is a additional sign that's right on the shield. So as the patron is walking on the bus, right in front of them on that shield in the black area is a portion of our Ride with Respect campaign that talks about the consequences for their actions towards the bus operator. And that's one of the things that in the legislation we're actually asking to mandate that all agencies in the state do that, as well as making it very large and visible. So we may be going back and looking at making that signage even more pronounced and looking at best practices across the country.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Malloy. Anyone else have questions at this time? Thank you.
I have an additional question based on that particular topic, please.
You're recognized. Ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you. And that signage is very important. Having an audible is helpful for those individuals that have difficulty reading, or are not unable to focus very well. As we have discovered, mental health is a challenge. But I think having it out their language would be helpful, and it would be easier to do that on the audible rather than, in multiple languages on a sign on the front of that security shield. when people are in a habit of doing something repetitively, i.e. they get on the bus on a daily basis or on a frequent basis, they may not recognize that sign to change should this legislation pass. So having it in Audible, if that's what's happening, available, and having it in a couple of different languages, that would be terrific, because I think that way we remind riders that the Ride with Respect program is an active campaign and does have consequences should it be violated.
Yeah, I'll go back with the team, and it's a great point. I'm going to go back with our team, and I can follow up with you guys, and we'll definitely look at that.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 5, information items. It says Transportation Department, December 2019. Is this something that you would go over, or is someone presenting this information, or is it just for me to call out at this point?
It's just for information, and if you have any questions, it's just for information, but if you have any questions, we have staff here to answer them.
Okay. So first subject is the rodeo. Any questions from the board? Shield installation update. I think we heard a little bit about that earlier and been kept in the loop. Any other questions in regards to that? And then the ATU negotiations, set meetings to conduct information sessions on February 3rd and February 4th, 2020. Any comments on ATU negotiations? Okay, if there are no further comments, I call the meeting adjourned at this time. Thank you.